One is a mind-bending Spanish tale about insecurities and the ever-present question of reality versus fantasy. The other, an Americanized, pop-culturized version of the same story with everyone's favorite maniac, Tom Cruise. Abre, Los Ojos, and Vanilla Sky. They remade it.
I thought I'd teach my robot to write all my songs.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of They Remade It. I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
I don't know why, it feels like it's been about 80 years since we did our last recording. We had a delay at first as well, but even then, it feels like, how is it already mid-March?
We pushed once, and then we pulled forward once, and then we almost pushed again, I think. But we're here.
Yeah. We have survived through February, but, with some of our faculties intact.
We made it through all of that good stuff that February has to offer, like colds and rampant sickness, and looking forward to being like, oh, more months. This year has more months.
Yeah, it really does. I actually had to have a bit of a just cool down for a bit just because, just to keep people in the loop, Hannah had surgery, and so I had to take care of her for a little bit. So I think that made me realize, oh yeah, it's actually been a very long couple of weeks.
Yeah, I've been kept apprised of that, and it sounded like quite a journey.
She's doing fine, by the way. She's all good now. But, oh lord, if February didn't make me feel each and every one of its days.
But it's getting hotter out there now. The temperature keeps rising. People are out. I'm sure. I don't know if it's getting picked up yet, but I'm out my office window. I'm literally watching kids on the sidewalk right outside my window slam mid-sized plastic cars into the ground, and it's making a really nice sound. So I don't know if that's going to get picked up at all, but that's fun.
The kids are all right. Other than watching kids perform, early acts of vehicular destruction. What else have you been watching?
Lots of stuff, but I'm only going to touch on one, just for the sake of brevity and for newness. But I did see The Monkey in theaters, the newest from Osgood Perkins, which I know I talked very briefly with you and Steph about at one of the movie nights we had recently. Which it's fun because the early part of the year is always a dumping ground for movies, especially like random horror in the theaters. But this year, like, they really went hard on it. Like 4 or 5 horror movies all came out theatrically within the same month, it feels like. This is definitely on the better end of those, which is a good thing because it's been middling to mixed. Results may vary for a lot of these, like Companion and Hard Eyes, which I touched on in the Cape Fear episode, I believe. But what The Monkey has over those is that it's not trying to present itself as something that it's not. In the case of Hard Eyes, where it's speculating on the concept of twisting genres like romantic comedy with horror, but never going the full Monty with it. And then Companion, which is, the forward-thinking Black Mirror-esque piece where the plot's laid out and it's where do you go from there. This is just Final Destination with a toy monkey. And for what it's worth, it has the most fun with its premise. There's no bones about it. It's goofy and silly in a lot of fun ways. And it was a fun night at the theater. The performances were great. It was hokey and hammy in a way that was intentional. It didn't feel like I think I've said this before, I only really care for the second of the Final Destination movies. The rest are just, like, impossible for me to get into because they're so overwritten, almost. In a way
which
that
is
they really
wild.
don't need to be. What was the thought process behind this? But, those movies make money. They're still making movies. New one's coming out, so whatever. Final Destination aside, The Monkey is fun. I think the way I put it is that it, not structurally maybe, but how the film is presented and how they went about writing, adapting the story, it feels a lot like one of the Stephen King television movies of the 90s, as opposed to a lot of his theatrical outings. So that's fun. I have a hard time saying a lot of those are any good, but it is fun. So
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like, you can't call them good movies, but you can call them interesting movies.
yeah. The Langoliers, Tommy Knockers, like they're all fun in their own ways.
Like, I dare a human being to be bored watching the friggin' Langoliers.
But yes, I watched The Monkey and I had fun with it, and that's pretty much it. Looking forward to what else Osgood Perkins is going to be doing. But yes, how about you?
Not much. As I mentioned, it's been a bit of a time the last few weeks, but for the most part, my time has actually been spent on games, and by games I mean one very specific game. Got a lot of fanfare when it was announced. Barely any fanfare when it came out, but Avowed, the latest from Obsidian, which I did not know at the time is part of the Pillars of Eternity universe, which is a different game series, which I'm pretty sure is just like another company's way of doing. It's either D&D or it's Pathfinder. I'm not sure, but it's a tabletop style game. It's kind of like it's basically Baldur's Gate, but just a little bit earlier. And by contrast, Avowed is fully a first-person, action adventure kind of in the vein of Skyrim. It's basically the way I described it to Hannah was that it's Skyrim with the fat trimmed down, where it's the kind of thing of you don't have to worry about merchants and everything going to bed at night. You can just go to them at any time of the day. Bows and guns don't actually have ammo. You can just keep shooting them as fast as you're able to. A lot of just trimmed down mechanics, really basic crafting upgrades, and I honestly love it to death. It is not trying to be anything more than what it is. It's straightforward, pretty generic fantasy world adventure with some cool twist to it that I wasn't expecting. It's the plot line that you play through is just not what I was anticipating going in, but I actually ended up really coming around for it. And I don't know, it grabbed me in a way I really didn't expect. I will say though, man, do some of these games just really like to just overburden you with lore. Because, like, I so desperately wanted to be able to sit there and read all these different passages and everything about all these different things about the world. But the fact that it's a lore built from a different game series, or, like, from a pre-existing game series, meant that we're talking about, like, theogonies and creation myths and stories of gods and mortals and all these insane names. It's like, oh, YL on the continent of Eortha with such another of Tales of Madness. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, I want this to be interesting, but when you just put book after book after book just in there, I'm like, I'm not here to read. I'm not here to read. I don't get what anybody's talking about, and that's annoying, but the game itself is fun when I'm not reading. So
a lot of people they'll do that, and it's either from a smaller developer or smaller studio because they have a story in their mind that they want to build up this grandiose universe, and a lot of them fancy themselves the next J.R.R. Tolkien. And then for larger studios, it's a good way to try and get in the door with a property that you can, add instances to later with sequels and spin-offs and things. So pick your poison, whichever route you're going. No one just does it to do it. But
yeah, I was like, no one will be Tolkien ever again, and we all need to accept that. Tolkien is the one and only instance where he did just do that for fun. Like,
yeah.
All other cases, it is. And okay, I won't say he's the only person who's ever done that for fun, because God knows I've also done it for fun. But he's the only one who made it coherent enough to be enjoyable as a property.
I'm not saying it's required, but I would like to know of like a current day game developer that for a title just sits in a library for 6 to 7 hours a day writing stuff in a notebook as they read. Like, that would be interesting. Who's out there doing that?
I'm sure at some point the Elder Scrolls did do that, but since it's been in the hands of Bethesda, I doubt that's been happening in the last 20 years.
That's what I'm saying. Modern. We got to go modern day.
But yeah, that pretty much took up all my time, and I really don't know if I watched basically anything else in the meantime. It's been a weird time. We had our movie nights. We watched most recently a movie called Thief.
Yes.
Which is a movie about a thief. Gotta be honest, it was a little dull. But, I think it's the way I think both I and Stephanie agreed on was that it's basically Baby Driver, but worse. It's like at times almost point for point, actually.
And that's the thing that I was trying to curb too, because I'm like, obviously opinions or whatever. I was kind of middling on it. It's probably my least favorite Man that I've seen, or at least on the lower end. I don't know if I would call it bad. It's just slow in parts and a little boring.
I'll say it wasn't bad flat out. Like, I'm kind of in the same vein as there, but golly, I was ready for it to be done. Though, to be fair, also we did also watch another one for our movie nights, which actually ended up being one of the ones for tonight. So that worked out.
A little odd planning on that, just because I had this episode planned for a little while, and then Stephanie put out a poll, and the Vanilla Sky, the Tom Cruise movie, was one of the movies on there, and I was like, well, I mean, we can do that if you want. Stu and I are doing an episode on it in 2 weeks, so yeah, you would have watched it anyways.
Good timing, Steph. Thank you.
Yes, but this is Vanilla Sky and Abre los ojos, or Open Your Eyes. English there.
We are not Spanish.
Nope, and I'm going to have fun with some Spanish names, so get ready for that. Starting out with the plot to Abre los Ojos from 1997, directed by Alejandro Amenabar. And once again, apologies for the pronunciations on any of these actor names. Some of them will be good because I know the names, and others will be approximations of what I think might be good, because that's how I do research. The movie starts with a handsome young man waking up to a female voice telling him to open his eyes. He drives to an empty city. Waking again, this time to a woman in his bed, he tells her not to leave him messages on his alarm clock. And that is the cold open to the movie. Now we teleport to a prison cell in Madrid. The 25-year-old man, named Cesar, played by Eduardo Noriega, tells his story to psychiatrist Antonia, played by Cheat Lara, while wearing a prosthetic mask. Flashbacks reveal the following events. Good-looking Cesar is attractive to women. At his birthday party, he flirts with Sofia, played by Penelope Cruz, his best friend Peleo's date, Peleo, played by Philly Martinez. Later, he takes her home and stays the night, but they do not sleep together. The next morning, Cesar's obsessive ex-lover Nuria, played by Najwa Nimri, pulls up outside Sofia's flat, offering him a ride and sex. On the way to her house, however, she crashes the car with the intent to kill them both. Cesar survives the crash but is horribly disfigured beyond the help of cosmetic surgery, so he decides to wear a mask to conceal his face. Sofia cannot bear to see him and tries to keep her distance. After Cesar's disfigurement, he begins to have a series of disorienting experiences. Drunk, Cesar falls asleep in the street. On awakening, everything has changed. Sofia now claims to love him, and the surgeons restore his lost looks. But as he makes love to Sofia one night, she suddenly changes to Nuria. Horrified, Cesar smothers her to death with a pillow. Yet everyone else believes Nuria is indeed the woman everyone calls Sofia, and he is imprisoned for her murder. While he is confined to the prison, fragments of his past return to him as if in a dream. It is revealed that shortly after falling asleep drunk on the street, Cesar signed a contract with Life Extension, a company specializing in cryonics, to be cryogenically preserved, and to experience extremely lucid and lifelike virtual reality dreams. Returning to their headquarters, under supervision by prison officers, he discovers they specialize in cryonics with a twist: artificial perception, or the provision of a fantasy based on the past to clients who are reborn in the future. He committed suicide at home shortly after signing the contract and was placed in cryonic suspension. Duvernois, the LE representative who explained Cesar's experiences to him while dreaming, reveals that the era is 150 years in the future, and Cesar's time from his awakening in the street onward has been a dream, spliced retroactively into his actual life and replacing his true memories. At the end of the film, Cesar decides to wake and be resurrected by committing suicide. Convinced his life since the drunken night in the street has been a nightmarish vision created by Life Extension, he leaps from the roof of the company's high-rise headquarters, and the film ends, apparently ambiguously, on a black screen with a woman once more telling him to open his eyes. But now, as we talk about the plot to 2001's Vanilla Sky, this time directed by Cameron Crowe, the movie is essentially the same as the original, which is good for me, beat for beat and sometimes scene for scene, with the exception of a couple added details here and there. The actual representation of the life that Tom Cruise lives is more so pulled from his past. There's a lot of references to a special Benny the dog, who was the first cryogenically frozen dog. More or less, he fell in a river and got frozen, but that's sort of the inspiration for a lot of the Life Extension stuff. And then almost all of the scenes leading up to the confrontation on the skyscraper were changed for various reasons. For example, I imagine they probably didn't want Tom Cruise walking around shooting civilians. So that might have been one reason for the decision.
I almost forgot about that scene, honestly.
But at any rate, I'll round that off with the primary cast members for Vanilla Sky. So we have Tom Cruise, who played David Ames. Kurt Russell was Curtis McCabe. Penelope Cruz, once more, coming back to play Sophia Serrano in a very Marty-style move. We get cast members between the two movies. Jason Lee played Brian Shelby. Cameron Diaz played Julie Gianni. Michael Shannon played Aaron, the guard at the prison, the primary guard. Timothy Spall played Thomas Tipp, Johnny Galecki was Peter Brown, Noah Taylor was Edmund Ventura, and Tilda Swinton shows up briefly as Rebecca Dearborn, who's kind of heading the Life Extension agency there. And that's everything. Were you confused? We'll probably just confuse you more by talking about the plots and going, well, when 2001 did this compared to 97 did this, it doesn't help. The format is not helped by the plots here.
Don't talk about how the sausage is made.
Who cares? First, speaking of how the sausage is made, I am going to hobble my way through Full Circle before handing over the reins to my co-host. Okay, so first up, the big guy, Tom Cruise, of course. He was David Ames in 2001's Vanilla Sky. We also have seen him previously as Vincent Lauria in 86's The Color of Money with Paul Newman, and he also appeared just last year as Ray Ferrier in 2005's War of the Worlds.
Oh, yeah, just last year in the show. For a second, I was like, War of the Worlds was a few years ago.
I even said 2000. Yeah, last year on the show, I believe, is when we covered that one. Next, we have Kurt Russell, who, first time on Full Circle, even though we've seen him twice, because he was Snake Plissken in both Escape from New York and Escape from L.A., and he, of course, shows up here as Curtis McCabe, the prison psychiatrist in Vanilla Sky. Next, we have Timothy Spall, British actor, who played Thomas Tipp in Vanilla Sky. We've only ever seen him as voiceover work for this show, having voiced Nick, one of the rats, in 2000's Chicken Run, and also the Bloodhound in Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, okay. I was like, Bloodhound? Oh, yeah.
The dog. The literal Bloodhound.
Yeah, I know what a Bloodhound is.
Well, it could have been the name of somebody. That's why I said the literal Bloodhound. I didn't think you don't know what dogs are.
Fair.
Next, we have Noah Taylor, who was Edmund Ventura in Vanilla Sky. We've seen him previously in Lara Croft Tomb Raider as Bryce, and he was also Mr. Bucket, the father, in 2005's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, also a Tim Burton picture. And finally, just a little something to throw in there for folks. Steven Spielberg, the director, we have seen previously as one of the celebrity-disguised aliens in 1997's Men in Black. And he also shows up very abruptly as a guest at Tom Cruise's party in Vanilla Sky. I have to figure he was just on the lot or something.
Yeah, that one was weird.
But that's Full Circle.
Rad. Oh boy, this one feels like a weird one to get into immediately, just because there's a lot going on, and yet it is still shockingly simple once you get down to the minutia of it. Which is kind of the sad benefit of hindsight now. We've had many a film, many a property, many a parody that has done the "it was all a dream" thing. And it's strange seeing some of the kind of predecessor examples of it. And it's especially strange seeing it done point for point the same, except just like more big Hollywood. Because I really didn't realize it until watching through because we ended up watching, for me at least, I saw Vanilla Sky first and then watched Open Your Eyes just because we did it for the show. And not for the show, we watched Vanilla Sky for the our little movie club. Going back through Open Your Eyes and just being like, hey, wow, look at these cool performances and these interesting individuals and everything. It made me realize, oh yeah, Vanilla Sky was choking on like Hollywood names. That was kind of annoying.
I mean, I'm not overly familiar with Spanish actors, so I have no idea how far-ranging the cast goes. Obviously, Penelope Cruz has a long-spanning career, and Eduardo Noriega, who played Cesar in Open Your Eyes, he's nothing to sneeze at either. So at least decently big names, but it's not like they just threw a bunch of people into the cast blender, including giant Hollywood directors of the 80s and 90s, apparently.
Right, yeah, that one is wild.
It's funny because it feels like Vanilla Sky is way more so choking on its premise of Tom Cruise as this. It's not just that he is this kid who lost his parents and now he's inherited this vast wealth and board position, 51% share of the company that his father owned, the publishing company. But also just his own nostalgia, which is kind of the point. That's not something that's really touched on much in Open Your Eyes. But Tom Cruise, the entire purpose of the movie, and part of this has less to do with the plot and more to do with the fact that Cameron Crowe's the fucking director, but it's just filled to the brim with all of these things that he remembers and loved growing up. And it's kind of funny that circles back around to the fact that the cast is so stacked with all these people that the audience can be like, oh, hey, I remember that person from this thing, and I remember them from this other thing 10 years ago, and hey, it's Kurt Russell. He was like a child Disney star turned action hero. Like, it feels like it's almost like an Ouroboros in Vanilla Sky.
Like, even the name Vanilla Sky it takes its name from, what was it, a Monet piece?
It was definitely a painting, yes.
Yeah, because it's meant to reference a specific painting, and it's very artistic skyline, and like it's what makes all of the dream sequences in Cruise's mind like all look nostalgic and beautiful and all these things because it's something from his past. And while I wish I could feel like, yeah, they did get all these big names to kind of coincide with this feeling of nostalgia, I'm guessing that wasn't the original intent.
No, I don't think so. I'm not going to
Yeah.
put money on that.
Yeah. I really wish I could enjoy Tom Cruise's acting in instances where he's considered to be at his best. But even this one, I was still just kind of like, yeah, it's Tom Cruise. Like, has about two speeds, that being annoyed, at least in this era, it's annoyed, bewilderment, and bursts of anger. And that's kind of it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. It's unfortunate because I do think that he's really good in this movie as that character, and part of that, I think, has to do with the fact that he is an asshole thrown into a life of richness that can't get over his childlike tendencies, which really fits really fits the Tom Cruise characterization.
Yeah, no shit.
I think I think he's really fun in this one as this character, and I think it's one of the few. What I even said before we watched the movie on movie night, that I think Vanilla Sky is one of the few Tom Cruise performances I actually like. I think
Fair.
I think he works pretty well in this. But just as a whole, Kurt Russell, every time he's on screen, I want to know more about this character. And this character that is not a character, that isn't real but thinks he's real. I know you had a sticking point about that.
Like at the very end, he starts going through this like existential crisis thing, kind of, pseudo Westworld kind of situation where he's like, he thinks he's real, even though he can't even he can't even remember his daughter's names because they don't actually exist, all these things. And it even kind of ends up centering the camera and shots on him for a bit, where it's like, why wasn't this guy the main character? Like, I would have loved, and you made a joke about this, but I'm going to say it again, and you can make the joke again, and I'll be just as annoyed. It's like, I would have loved to have seen a story about what is effectively an NPC in a real person's, fantasy world. And I know you're going to say the thing about Free Guy. I know it.
I wasn't going to, because I knew that you would double back and say it for me. So
fair. So yeah, but I know, and yes, I know that is the premise of Free Guy. And anyone who tells me to go watch it again, I invite you to get a life. But it's
who's
I don't
trying
know,
to
for some
force you
reason
to watch Free Guy?
I mean, I don't know. Like, anytime I tell I think I told my brother and my dad that, like, I saw that and I hate it. They kept giving me shit for it, but I might also just be misremembering that, and I might just be like, I might just have too much of a chip on my shoulder about that one. But anyway, point being, anytime Kurt Russell's character was on screen, and honestly, also the same with the psychiatrist in the original, he was also extremely well done. Let me see, what was this guy? What was it? Antonio. Played by Chete Lara.
Okay, it's like, I don't know how to pronounce the name, but
I assume Chete. But both of them really solid roles. Really, like they did. Again, I found Kurt Russell far more interesting than Cruise. That was for sure. And kind of just following on a point you said about him, this being Tom Cruise in Vanilla Sky, about him being a fun character and everything. While I agree, I kind of also feel like him being more fun than Cesar, played by Eduardo Noriega. I feel like him being more interesting and fun and more of like a down-to-earth character by comparison, at least by the end, made me kind of like the story less. I kind of preferred the more like less redeemable aspects of Cesar in the original one, because it actually felt like his arc meant something in the end. Like he was a selfish prick, and he was projecting all of this stuff from a life that he wasn't able to have because he was so stuck in his own, childish mindset. And seeing Cruise do that really just kind of felt like, he was the smug dickhead in the beginning, and he was a slightly less smug, smaller dickhead in the end.
I mean, I don't disagree, because I like Noriega's performance more. I'm just saying. I was just saying that I like Cruise's performance, but Noriega steals it because he's actually terrifying as a character.
Yeah,
like
fully.
I would not want to be Penelope Cruz at the bar with him after his accident. I would not want to be in that situation. It would scare the piss out of me. The one thing is I don't know how much of an actual evolution he goes through either as a character. It's more so, I mean, it's torture for both of these characters. That's the point, is that they're living these, they're wealthy and they've been able to pay for this experience as opposed to just dying like normal fucking people. so that they can have their fantasies, and they're tortured because they're, well, outside of the realm of the movie, it's because they're awful people. But internally, they're mixing all of these realities together in some vague sense of, I need tech support because the thing ain't working. It doesn't feel like Cruz or Noriega actually learn much from their experiences. Maybe if there was more interaction post-reveal between them and their respective psychiatrists, I would get more of that, because they could sort of, relate to the fact that someone else is having a crisis about their reality, someone other than them. And I think Noriega gets really close, because there's the scene where he looks at Chetelera lying on the ground, sort of defeated, but then he turns around and just walks the other way. So it's like, oh, it's almost there, but I don't know. That's something that I wish, not to make the movies even longer, but something I wish that we had time to explore.
It definitely ended where it needed to end, but I do agree that it would have been nice to have something else. It also kind of brought up the fact of, which I guess now we're just kind of getting caught up in the premise, which I feel like Vanilla Sky kind of does a little bit too much compared to the original. Because the original, it feels very cerebral. A lot of it very much just feels like you're not really sure what reality is, and the fact that it's all a simulated kind of world is kind of more is kind of just like there. It's like, oh, there's a reason for it, and we're not going to explain too much beyond that. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, they could have easily found a way of ending it without revealing anything about that, and I think it would have worked in Open Your Eyes, but it did get kind of caught up in the whole thing with the conspiracy and like tech support and all these different things in Vanilla Sky a bit more than I would have liked. But to that end, I do agree that it would have been interesting to see his interaction with the therapist, and then also maybe have the kind of moral quandary of, do I escape and live in the real world, but then condemn this simulated individual to death, effectively, or do I stick around for the sake of people that are effectively one-to-one with actual people? Mm-hmm. It's like, man, there's entire sci-fi plots that don't get this deep. It's like, man, they kind of just glaze over the fact that they have a full environment there with individuals passing the Turing test on a consistent level.
There's also this interesting bit, I say kind of interesting bit, with the way that both of these movies end, because the entire conceit of waking up from this version of reality is basically to kill yourself, because it involves, taking a leap of faith off of the skyscraper of the life extension building. And I could see essays by mid-20-somethings being written about the movies like, is any of this real? Is he actually 150 years? Is this more part of his delusions? Things like that. I think it's much more interesting to take this as a sci-fi premise and this is actually really happening. But I mean, the purpose of the ambiguous endings of just the eye waking, opening to the phrase "open your eyes," which is sort of like a mirror of the first scene of the movie when he's dreaming. It's like, oh, is any of that real? Was it just another dream? Did he actually kill himself and now he's in an afterlife of sorts? There's a lot of ambiguity there, but I think it's more interesting as like a futuristic sci-fi story, so I choose to believe that that's what really happened.
And I imagine there's also like a certain amount of parallels to be done with the concept of willingly taking your own life and the idea of being permanently disfigured or permanently bedbound and that sort of thing, the idea of like euthanasia. And I'm sure there's a certain amount of that to be read into it as well, because both major incidents involving the dream was him killing himself. First, it was him killing himself before being put into the dream, which, side note, how did that work? He definitely was dead, but then they put him on ice, and that was okay. So he wasn't quite dead. Like, I don't know. That one just confused me. Like, I wasn't sure why they couldn't just put him on ice immediately and why he had to do the life-taking. But I'm sure it's part of, like, the messaging. But like, I digress.
That's also when we start getting into tricky territory about how cryogenics is even supposed to work. Because obviously people that are cryogenically froze right now are in fact dead. And they knew that they would be dead going into it. The purpose is like, maybe they can be revived at some point and then fixed. So I guess it doesn't matter at what point he's put in there, because he'll be dead regardless, as long as he's not like super decayed or something. I don't know. But it's sci-fi. It's sci-fi. Throw up the sci-fi here.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, I'm getting caught up in the premise. But like, it's that, and then also the fact that he has to commit suicide to escape the dream as well. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty significant parallel there. It's escaping, like the idea of escaping reality and escaping hardship and that sort of thing. And that's a very heavy topic. And I don't know, I feel like it tackles it just a little bit more realistically, for lack of a better term, in the original. I mean, seeing Tom Cruise on top of the giant building, I'm just kind of like, I don't know why I'm just not vibing with this compared to when Cesar is kind of having his penultimate moment. And I couldn't even tell you why necessarily. I'm not sure if you could pinpoint any kind of difference, but like, I don't know. It just everything felt very gleaming and very high Hollywood in Vanilla Sky. It's just I think that just kind of robbed it of the more intimate experience that the original had. And I don't really know how to put it better than that, honestly. Like, this is all basing off of vibes right now.
Well, it's weird because it's like I want to say that the original is a more fair character focused drama, but that's not even really the case because they that's the whole purpose of Vanilla Sky as well, is the relation to these characters. The problem for me is I think they add way too many of them. There are a lot of people running around in this cast, and most of them hardly do much of anything. The point of the Cesar / David character having a mysterious figure or group of figures trying to knock him out of the majority shareholdings of his father's company, that's present in both movies, but there is like in Vanilla Sky, there's like 7 of them called the 7 dwarfs that they say that are all scheming, and then there's also this Timothy Spall lawyer character that gets a lot of scenes. We have a couple of different interns and like assistants, one of which is Big Bang Theory man, Johnny Galecki, which is a little distracting, but not his fault. This was 2001. So it's
also the best friend character. I mean, he's a fully major character, but the best friend character is My Name Is Earl, and I'm sorry that I could not unsee that.
Yeah, Jason Lee doesn't do a lot for me, unfortunately.
Nah,
so
same. I think he's fine, but nothing to stand out. But I do agree. Like there are so many dang characters in the remake that I just kind of at a certain point wonder, were they really just trying to kind of fill out the bingo card? Like why was Big Bang Theory guy in there? I'm honestly trying to think back. It's like, did he do anything for the plot?
He was just an assistant, and the purpose of that is to show you that Tom Cruise is big. He has people under him, I guess.
Oh no. Okay.
Well, I mean, there's no other reason to have that character in there.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. I'm agreeing with you. Don't worry. I'm not trying to I'm shaming the movie, not you.
Yeah, I would assume that they wouldn't just throw that in there as fluff. There was some intent, and it was probably like, oh, look, he has an assistant that tells him a couple things are happening because, of course, he would have an assistant. Like it's a circular logic sort of thing.
Yeah, it felt like so much of Vanilla Sky was just trying to justify its existence. Now that I think about it. Feels like some scenes just drag on just a bit too much. Even the scene where, the Cameron Diaz character eventually drives them headlong into a wall. Even that one kind of drags on at a certain point where we kind of realize, yeah, okay, she is crazy and she's going to do something. But the amount of time from reveal that she might be crazy to car crash in Vanilla Sky is about 10 times longer than in Open Your Eyes, where she kind of just goes, do you believe in God? And then she goes through a guardrail and it's over. Like, see, that's shocking. That's a surprise. But having the build up with Cameron Diaz's character, who, incidentally, always kind of looks like she's just a little bit crazy anyway, just with her smile. And it, like, no offense to the woman, but like, anytime she smiled in this movie, I was like, she's going to go completely nuts.
The dialogue does not help her. At one point in the car, she says, I swallowed your cum. That has to mean something. I'm like, I wish I was in the theater for that. Yeah. See all the nanas and pop-pops watching the fun Tom Cruise movie.
So that, yeah, well, dialogue in Vanilla Sky was kind of weird.
I feel bad for saying it as many times as I have, especially because I don't know who wrote the treatment for Vanilla Sky, but some of the dialogue feels really Cameron Crowe too. So I just gonna say I assume that it's him sort of pulling from what he likes to do, and I mean he worked with Tom Cruise before this on Jerry Maguire. So and that's a decent movie. So at least he kind of understands the assignment with Tom Cruise. But more often than not, if you hear dialogue like that, it's just like, okay, he's pulling from his Fast Times at Ridgemont High well. He's going back to his high school 80s movie and pulling from there. And which is maybe that's unfair, but knowing he's like such a big music guy too, I feel like that's where my first point came in, where in Open Your Eyes, the fantasy reality is constructed to be a continuation of your life in a more pleasant sense, the way you would want it to continue. In Vanilla Sky, it's like Ready Player One for your brain, where it's just a bunch of random shit that you liked growing up thrown into a big witch's cauldron and regurgitated back out at you. There are scenes in the movie that are directly mimicking scenes from To Kill a Mockingbird, the Free Will and Bob Dylan album. There's one scene, the confrontation in both of these movies, the initial confrontation at Life Extension where they're sitting at the table and, you know, they get the contract and they see that he signed. In the original, there's this haunting sting right before Cesar runs out and knocks over the security guard and, well, goes on his civilian shooting spree. And it, like, the scoring there is really intense and vibrant, and it's like, oh my god, this guy is cracking up. In Vanilla Sky, it is the Beach Boys singing Good Vibrations. And I'm like, that's a very Cameron Crowe choice. That's something he would do. So,
yeah. It does undercut the entirety of the entire intensity of that scene. I will say that because again, like you said, with him going on his, you know, I don't like turning on God mode in GTA essentially, in the original. Yeah, it shows the state of this guy's mind and how much he's just in that I don't care anymore mentality. Meanwhile, just seeing Tom Cruise run around asking for tech support to the sound of Good Vibration, I'm like, this feels like this doesn't feel like Tom Cruise's dream. This feels like one of my dreams, where it's just like, what's happening, and why are we doing this, and how is this supposed to make sense?
All right, well, I mean, my segment of bullying the director is mostly over. So the other thing that I just wanted to bring up, and this is early Cruise. This is right after Mission Impossible 1, maybe Mission Impossible 2. So he's not full-on action movie star Tom Cruise yet. I think this was one of the last instances where you could not only get a really good performance out of Cruise, but you could like put a bunch of shit on his face and he wouldn't care. Because he's wearing multiple prosthetics in this thing, which is, again, it's not like super amazing for an actor, but it is kind of super amazing for him as an actor. So I'm like, wow, look at all the gunk everywhere that Tom Cruise is wearing.
Feels like the bar is kind of low here.
Like, well, I even said that. I said it was low.
I know. I'm just like, I don't know what it is in particular, but I don't think I truly just, I wish, and I said it before, but I truly just can't really care for his performance in this, even with the prosthesis and everything, which I will say does look impressive. I will say the facial prosthesis is definitely better than in the original, but then again, they had a higher budget, so that's not really winning anything. I don't know. Even both of these, actually, it didn't really seem like he was, for as much as they go on about it, he doesn't seem like he's that messed up from the accident. Like, if he had to do full facial reconstruction and his arm was broken, you'd think there'd be a bit more than just that, you know? I figured he'd be bedbound, at least. It's just so hard for me to look at him doing anything in this movie and just being like, yeah, this is a genuinely good performance for an actor. Like, it's good for him, I agree, but it's just like, I'm still kind of bored with him at a certain point. I loved everything going on around him was super interesting, but he himself, not as much.
I think it's a good performance all around, but just generally speaking, the bar is pretty low for Cruise, so I get that 100%. But I think he at least services the movie fine. That being said, I think that the cast themselves in Open Your Eyes they come together much better. I think that Feli Martinez does a better job as the friend than Jason Lee does. Again, not much hate towards Jason Lee, but I've never really vibed with him outside of comedies. He doesn't do much for me. Penelope Cruz is playing the same character in both of these movies, and kind of gives the same performance, which is perfectly acceptable, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I will say it's like she's one of the stronger characters.
Yeah, like it's a solid cast all around. And again, there's not a million characters in Open Your Eyes. It's a tight knit cast. There's like 5 people. There are 5 people driving all of the action. Maybe 6 if you want to count the tech support guy at the end.
He pretty much is the literal Deus Ex Machina. Actually, now that I think about it, that's about as literal Deus Ex Machina as we've had since ancient Greece.
I don't have much else to go off on this one. I think that the original is better, but I do consider Vanilla Sky to be a decent movie. I don't know if I would say it's super good or anything, because it loses me in a lot of places, and it has a lot of that, like I said, like mind-numbing Ready Player One-ness that I'm just sick of. And I say that as if like a Free Guy or a Ready Player One, as if that's what it's doing, and it's not really, because it's integrated fairly well, and they don't really touch on it until the end, with the exception of the Beach Boys thing. That was not integrated well, but everything else is. It's just I am so sort of overwrought with that kind of stuff that I can't help but notice it. But with that aside, I do think that Vanilla Sky is a pretty good movie. It's just Open Your Eyes is so much better on almost every measure.
Yeah, this definitely feels like one of those instances of whenever we kind of think back on, like, for as much as we have lost the track on this one, but it's kind of thinking on, why did they remake a movie? In this case, I really do think it's kind of the same instance as, hey, guess what, of Infernal Affairs and The Departed, of someone saw a premise of a film in another country, and they're like, hey, we can do that the American way and make money. And they, and invariably and inevitably did, but they just seem to kind of lose the track along the way. Not as bad in this one as in The Departed, but it is weird seeing that being slightly consistent trend, and we've seen stuff vaguely similar to this before. I won't necessarily invoke the Day of the Jackal, just because the remake itself wasn't even allowed to be called Day of the Jackal because it was so different.
Right. Well,
just being called the Jackal. But yeah.
Well, for a little history here, this is something I actually do know. I can't tell you why a studio signed off on it necessarily, but I can say that the reason that it was picked up, or that it, the germ of the idea for the remake, is because Open Your Eyes screened at Sundance in like 98 or 99. Tom Cruise saw it at Sundance, and he's like, I really like that movie. I want to do that. So he picked it up, produced it himself, and he took it to director Cameron Crowe because they worked together on Jerry Maguire, and he's like, I know this guy. And so the remake was all Tom Cruise's idea because he really liked the original movie.
I gotta be real. That explains basically everything I felt about this movie. This fully 100% is like, okay, so this is just a Tom Cruise vanity piece. Got it.
I mean, kind of, yeah. If you're going to throw yourself into the mix, he's like, I really want to make this movie. I'm not going to direct it, but I will be in it. And Cameron was like, okay, I get. Well, you're producing it, so you're fronting a lot of the bill. So
yeah, no kidding. Good Lord. Like, yeah, that fully explains every gripe I had with this, I think. It's like, yeah, no wonder it feels like it's just Tom Cruise going to the camera at all times. It's like, it's because he did the whole damn thing.
It was all him.
So predictable.
I'm glad. I am glad that they. I know I already mentioned this. It's just it came back into my head, but I'm glad that Penelope Cruz came back for Vanilla Sky in the same role. I mentioned it as like a real Marty thing because I don't think we've ever really seen that on the show before, unless it's a sequel where an actor comes back to play the same character. And now, in the span of 3 episodes, we've had that twice this year. Wild to me.
Oh, God. Yeah,
because Marty had like 3 of the people from the original teleplay join on for the movie, and then in this one, Penelope Cruz as Sophia. So
yeah, that is weird. Huh. And if we do the next Karate Kid movie, we sort of have both.
Yeah, whenever that comes out. It's supposed to be 2025. We'll see. Things keep getting pushed. So
that will be the strangest instance of a remake we've had, where it's I think the first instance of a convergence we've ever had.
Yeah, well, also it kind of rewrites history because it's like, oh, so yeah, the 2010 Karate Kid, not a remake because they're in the same universe. It's a sequel, kind of. Yeah. It's a spin-off sequel.
I'm willing to... That okay? I imagine, I don't know whether or not that will remain to be seen or not, for the simple fact of the new one trailer doesn't even seem to bring even partial reference to Jaden Smith's character. So it might just be like, oh, none of that happened and Jackie Chan is just here now.
Well, he's playing the same character though, so.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
His name is Mr. Han.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough. So yeah, I'll be shocked to think if they even bring up Jaden Smith's character in the new one.
They probably don't want to touch that baggage. The kid's a little strange. I don't know about you, but I do have a question for you that I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on. But
well, thank goodness, because I definitely don't.
That's fine. We'll just ruminate on this, then we'll chew it a bit. But say you are exceedingly wealthy and you're in a situation where you want to set up an account with this life extension place. You go into Cryonics. And I should say, this is not Open Your Eyes. This is Vanilla Sky. This is the pure Cameron Cronus of it all. What is your life extended universe looking like? What are all of the things from your past that get boiled down and injected through a syringe into your everyday life?
Honestly, I imagine it's just going to be a very big game of SimCity. I feel like that's all I'd want to do is just like muck around with stuff. You know, I simply want to just like keep doing the same thing I'm normally doing and just like having sprinklings of the nicer parts of my life. It's like, if we're here and we're already able to break physics with giant buildings and all these things, like, just let me just mess with the system a little, you know? Let me have fun. I think this whole idea of like just continuing on as it went, I'm like, no, like I want to have my own island maybe, and then just kind of vacation away and do different things and stuff. It's like, I don't know. I want to see people. I want to see if I can build something better.
Well, I guess that's an interesting thought then, because that's under the assumption that you are aware of the fake reality. So
I
as
guess
opposed
so.
to
I
just
mean,
your
well,
memories affecting what your reality looks like. So
well,
that's
to be fair,
interesting.
to be fair, even in the fiction of the movie, he deliberately asks to have his memories start back up at that particular time. You could just as easily say, "Hey, I'd like to be fully aware of the situation, and I want to have full control." Or at least as much control as they'll give me.
I suppose. I mean,
Um,
if you're paying, if you want the package, I don't know why he wouldn't have done that. But it's probably
right,
because
yeah,
a lot of people maybe would go crazy. I don't know, but
right, yeah. Like the idea of like, I'm sure, like, I'm not having any delusions of grandeur here. I think I would probably lose my mind inside a week. But it's like if I'm going to lose my mind, it might as well be fun rather than just I'd want to be able to continue my life. I'd want to still be with Hannah. I'd want to still be able to do the things that I love. But if given the opportunity, yeah, I'd love to be able to just be like, you know what? Forget physics. Let's just have fun with this. Let's just have an ultimate sandbox where I can just build things and I don't know. I'm basically just minor godding it a little, but when put in that situation, why wouldn't you do that? Honestly,
which I mean is also a curious question because then it's like, okay, he's been in this reality for 150 years. What does that look like? Does his memory keep getting reset? Is it just that the timeline is so stretched that you don't realize how much real time has passed? That's something that
I
he's
guess
gotten into. It's
my guess is that it's the second one, or that maybe it took so long for his brain to fully come back alive that it just didn't come back up for like 150 years. I wouldn't be surprised if they just flat out don't have the technology that they're advertising at the time of life extension, and that they're just being like, oh yeah, we totally have this, and then they lock them up and they're like, okay, now that they're completely out and they can't challenge us, let's figure this stuff out and then pipe it to them. That way, whenever they do wake up, they'll still pay us.
I guess they could do that. How are you going to prove it? It's like,
Exactly, yeah. So like, I'm sure there'd be some grand expose if someone got into the company or whatever the hell, but like on the surface for the client themselves, they're not going to know. They're out until they decide not to be.
That's a beautiful thought.
So yeah, assuming I'm allowed to have some amount of control, I'd want to do that. If I didn't get to have control, I mean, I don't know. I guess it would just be find the most recent point in my life where things went downhill and just fix it. It's like, I couldn't tell you one specifically. It's like the problem with the premise of all of it is that it really does require me to be in such a bad place that I'm willing to go through all of that. If,
Right.
if not for the ability to be like, hey, I can just control everything now.
Well, I don't think I could give a specific spot in my life where I would start back up from, but what I more so mean would be I imagine that my reality would continue on as normal. There would be like more shots from The Simpsons that would be mirrored through my eyes every day. I don't know that I would probably hear more Billy Joel in my day-to-day life. I don't know that Pokemon commercial where the bus driver squishes them all into the game, like that would probably show up at some point. I don't know. All these things that I remember.
I'm learning so many strangely specific things about you, Jacob.
Yeah.
It's like, even thinking about that, I don't know what the heck mine would entail, because I don't really have any specific items in my brain towards that. I don't know. I feel like it'd probably just kind of end up being more like Total Recall, where I just all of a sudden become an action hero or some crap. Or like, going on Bond-esque exotic adventures and things to like the Caribbean and that sort of thing. It's like, that'd be fun, to go on vacation, but also like some activities.
Yeah.
Which is the best way to describe being caught up in a James Bond style life. It's vacation with activities.
Uh-oh, no, I accidentally picked the Quantum of Solace timeline, and now
hell.
everyone's out to get I made a mistake.
I guess if I had to be more specific for myself, it'd probably be like Uncharted, just because I'm a big fan of that series. Not the movie, the games.
Yeah. Oh, I'm aware. Well, you said series, so that makes it very clear. Because that is
Rude.
not getting another fucking movie. I don't care what they
Absolutely
say.
not. But yeah, it'd probably just be that, where I just like go about life, and then all of a sudden just action things happen, and I get to do fun, cool activities while being a cool, suave adventurer or whatever.
Yeah, you're in a
Not
giant
necessarily suave.
Pacific
I'd be fine
Rim
still
bot.
being my... Yeah, that'd be also fun. Yeah, no, it's... I don't have grandiose ideas of my life unless I have full control over the situation, in which case I have extremely grandiose ideas. But if it's just like, oh, I can just zhuzh my life up a little bit, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll just go on cool trips, basically.
And I definitely don't have any grandiose ideas, which is why I'm like, well, my life would probably just continue as it is, but there would be slightly more references to things that I grew up with just sprinkled throughout, just like in Vanilla Sky.
Yeah, no, I'm going full, like, I guess, I mean, for lack of a better term, Ready Player One, but, less cringe.
We'll see. When I'm watching your life extension
Oh, God.
in 40 years or 50 years, however long.
If not, that would be awful. Like, it turns out that they're actually, like, filming the internal life extension things of all these people and, like, selling them as, like, movies or something. It's basically, they have their own steady supply of Truman shows.
Oh my god, that would be awful. I mean, unless you knew that you were getting into that. But it would probably be like
Imagine-
sign a release form and then we'll wipe your memory so that you approved it but you don't remember it. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah. It's basically the Matrix, but for prime time.
Ooh, that's a scary thought too.
Honestly, that would be the most realistic version of the Matrix. It wouldn't be an AI takeover. It would be that Hollywood finds a way to capitalize off of people being in suspended animation.
Yeah, isn't that what they're always saying? The beauty of AI created content is it's tailored specifically to what you want. Finally, no one can talk about art anymore. We just get what we want and die. Or we get what we want while we're dead. Life extension, ladies and gentlemen.
Nothing means anything anymore. I try not to be jaded these days, people, I swear.
Let's be a little social. How about it? You want to be social with me?
You know, it's sure. I could use a bit of that in my life.
Go ahead and follow us on any of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're on things like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spreaker, Podbay, Podmatic, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube. We are hosted, however, by Spotify for podcasts, formerly Anchor.
Goodbye, Anchor.
In the arms of... Go ahead and send us an email, theyremadeit@gmail.com, with suggestions for future episodes that you may want us to cover. Thoughts on the episode or the podcast. What do you like? What don't you like? Or if you just want to say hi, that's fine too. And go ahead and follow us, theyremadeit.bluesky.social, for updates when episodes are going live. Posters and diagrams and things for what we've been watching, reading, playing, engaging with. Potential future episodes that we might do at some point in the, future, and then little videos that I've started putting together for the Full Circles regarding actors and actresses that we've covered multiple times on this show. And that is it for Full Circle.
So now I just kind of want to just be able to have a little Vanilla Sky thing. It's like, oh, I'd love to just kind of check out for a while and just do things. It'd be really nice nowadays.
Yeah, escape away from it all.
Well, on that cheery note, as always, I'm your host, Stuart.
And I'm your host, Jacob.
I'm
The French.
gonna... God damn it, Jacob.
It's a nightmare! She goes with me to a blossom room. I'm picking up good vibrations. She's giving me the